love the smell of new computer parts in the morning. Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. If you remember earlier this week, we had a bit of a delay getting TGW off to the start, our weekly podcast, and the reason for that, which I mentioned on the show, was because of some DDoS attacks. And not DDoS attacks on me, but actually on my younger brother, who plays a lot of Call of Duty Black Ops 2 on Xbox 360, and I guess the servers on there probably aren't as secure as maybe they were when, the 360 was its primary console. I don't know if Microsoft is keeping up security on there, but it seems like it's really, really easy to get a hold of someone's IP address off there from Xbox Live parties, and then you could just go ahead and DDoS away. And that's what a bunch of these kids are doing to him. So we needed to figure out a solution to that. And obviously the solution that I came to was like, hey, why don't we just get you a PC? And he was like, yeah, let's get a PC. So let the PC Master Race console conversion therapy begin. So the first thing we needed to do was figure out how we were going to fund this build, and he immediately said well, I'll sell my Xbox 360 and all my games and all my PS4 games in the PS4, and then I was like, whoa, hang on, that's my PS4, you're not selling my PS4, you can sell your games, but we're not selling the PS4, let's just be clear about that. So we kept the PS4, but we are selling the 360 and all of the games and everything, so I went out and put up the money for him so that we can go up to Micro Center and get this done right away, because I was excited to get him onto the PC. So we shot up to Micro Center, got the parts for the builds, wound up spending $336 out of pocket initially because I was planning to reuse a hard drive that we had actually pulled out of the PS4 back around Christmas time, because I had got him a 1 terabyte SSHD for the PS4 that I installed on Christmas Day to upgrade the hard drive on there. So I still had the 500 gigabyte pulled out of the PS4, and I was like, okay, we're taking him from the console and bringing him to PC. How poetic would it be to be using a hard drive out of a console, even if it's not going to be the most fast thing? I thought it would at least be good enough, but this thing was just abysmally slow. Like, OS was taking like a minute and a half to boot, and when I tried to load up games, it took like 4 or 5 minutes for me to load up Doom the first initial time. So I was like, okay, this is not good. And then once we were getting into games, the game was chugging itself, and I knew it wasn't bound to the CPU and the GPU because of the hardware we went with, the FX 8320E, and the graphics card, the EVGA GTX 950 SSC, which we actually got a price match from Amazon, was listed at $170 at Micro Center, and then they price matched it down to $150 for us. So that was a really good deal. They had a couple other ones around the same price point, MSI and an Asus Strix for around like $155, $160. But I was like, hey, if they can price match the SSC edition for $150, let's go ahead and do that. So I knew that wasn't the major bottleneck there on Doom, because it was getting way too low FPS. So I actually went out to Best Buy immediately. I picked up another PNY 240 gig SSD or 256 gig. I can't even remember now off the top of my head, but it's one of those. But yeah, so I picked that up for $60, the same one that I'm using in the AMD build we're giving away. And that sorted out the problem immediately. I reinstalled Windows 10 and got the Doom back on there, and then it booted up, fine. It was booting up really fast, and now it's just good to go. As far as the actual build process was concerned, I did walk him through it. I sat there and I helped him, and I did some of the parts. I put on like the CPU cooler, and I put the graphics card in, lowered the motherboard, but for the rest of the stuff, I made sure he was there throughout the entire process so that I could walk him through it and teach him things and tell him, why I'm doing this, and why do we need to be careful with the CPU, why do we not want to put any force or not touch the pins on the bottom and grounding and all that stuff, and just basic safety and stuff like that, working with computer parts. And I think he learned enough that, in the future he'll probably be a little bit more comfortable, and I'm sure I can, I would probably still have to be there for it with him, but he's never even watched like a video, online of like how to build a PC or anything like that. So that's why I had to be there and really help him and walk him through it and help him with some of the things. But we did a good job. He put in like the CPU and stuff like that, and no major problems at all with the build. Everything went really smoothly with that. We did stick with the stock cooler for now. I am going to take that off of there as soon as he gets a bigger mechanical drive to put in the system with the SSD. When I do that and open up the system again, I'm going to pull that out and throw a Noctua cooler in there that I have sitting out in the trunk of the car. It just, the car was not here when we were doing the build, so I was like, the Noctua cooler's not here, so I'll just have to use the reference cooler. So that's on there for now, but we will take it off. Didn't have any big problem with the temps though, and I boosted it up to 4 gigahertz, and it was running under 60 degrees Celsius. The GPU as well was running around 60 degrees Celsius on that 950 SSC, which is using the full-length ACX cooler. They have the smaller one with the single fan, but this is the dual fan model. Thankfully, we kept the cost down on the build a little bit by using a case and power supply that I had laying around from my Dark Slant Rising build, which I had converted into my Mini ITX build with most of the parts, but the power supply and case were still here. It was the Fractal Design Define R5 Blackout Edition and a Fractal Design 750 watt semi-modular power supply. So those were already in there, so I decided we could reuse those and not have to buy a PSU and a case again, which would bring up the cost of the build like over like $400. But you could easily go out and pick up a case and power supply for like $30 each and throw that in there, and this would be a pretty damn good budget build for around like $450 if you got a different case and power supply, because this case and power supply definitely costs way too much in proportion to the other parts that are in this build. The motherboard in there is the Gigabyte 970A UD3P, so it was all black, and I stuck with Crucial Ballistics black RAM on this one, so we can kind of keep a consistent look across the whole build, so it's pretty much all black in there completely. Even the SSD is black with like a carbon fibery type finish on it. And we went ahead and we booted up some games on this thing. I wanted to test a few games for you guys. So we tested out Counter-Strike, Black Ops 2, and Doom. And I'm going to do some more testing, actually. If you remember, I'm going to do the benchmarking on the R7 370. Well, I decided to actually make that a matchup, and I'm going to be testing the 370 versus the GTX 950 and all of those games that you guys were asking me to test. And I think that's going to make for a really fair matchup. And if you want to make any predictions, let me know in the comments below. What do you think is going to win? The 2GB GTX 950 or the 2GB R7 370 from AMD? Because I'm kind of torn on this. I think it's going to kind of go mixed, and I'm going to have a good mixture of titles that don't necessarily favor like NVIDIA or AMD. I'm just going to, test like a bunch of stuff, and then we'll just see what's what. The first game I wanted to test was Doom, being that it just came out yesterday, and building this system, I was genuinely curious how the 950 would be able to handle that new game. So I went and threw it on 1080p on the high preset, and I lowered the virtual memory pool down to low so that it wouldn't be caning the memory bus and the VRAM too much, because I know this game does use a decent amount of video memory, and it really can affect the memory bus quite a bit if you do keep that setting up high. So I dropped that down to low, but left everything else on the high preset. And we got an average of 33 FPS at 1080p, which is not amazing, but there wasn't any massive lag spikes. It was pretty consistent between like 33 and 40 FPS, and it was playable, probably for most people. For me, I would rather be playing at 60, obviously, but it wasn't too bad. But I wanted to see if we can get better than that, so I dropped it down to 1600 by 900, and that actually allowed me to bring it up to the Ultra preset, still on the low virtual memory pool though, and that gave us an average of 52 FPS, but I was frequently seeing that go over 60 and even approaching on 70 FPS at some time, so that was really good to see that playing at 900p like that, which is, I would deem a perfectly playable experience, especially considering that this is like about a $400 build here that we use for this. My brother's go-to game on the console was Call of Duty Black Ops 2, so we put that on there for him, and it ran that game amazing, getting an average of 107.3 FPS and a minimum of 73. And thankfully, I have him gaming on my older Asus VG248QE 144Hz monitor, which happens to have G-Sync installed in it. I installed the G-Sync in there myself back when that monitor first came, like not when the G-Sync units first came out. You could actually buy those separately and install them only in this monitor. So I was like, oh good, I have that monitor, I'm getting a G-Sync kit. And I got that thing like day one, and this thing's been sitting around just collecting dust. I had to give him a monitor to play on, so I was like, Let's give him a G-Sync monitor. So he's got 144 hertz, and I'm sure he probably can't tell the difference yet, but it's glorious. I'm watching it, and I'm like, this is amazing. He's getting like 144 FPS most of the time in Black Ops 2. And then we switched it over to Counter-Strike Go, because obviously, if he's going to get good on the PC, then he's going to have to get good at CSGO. And he watches other YouTubers that play CSGO, so he wanted to play some Counter-Strike. So we popped that on 1080p, maxed out the settings. Besides the anti-aliasing, I left it 2 times, but everything else was cranked up to the highest. And we got an average of 173 FPS with a minimum of 83. And most of the time, it was really up over 100. And if we left the VSync on, it was just pinned at like 144 almost all the time. Alright, so there you go, guys. My brother's first gaming PC, and I think it's a really good system for someone that's just starting out on the PC. It plays all the games he wants to be able to play, 1080p, maxed out and everything, and getting over 60 FPS, which I really don't think you could probably ask for much better than that for a build we threw together for around $400, because I did have that case and power supply laying around. But if you were getting these parts, you could easily go out and get like a 500 watt EVGA PSU for like $35 and a cheap micro ATX case for like $25, and you could definitely put this build together for under $450. And I'm going to put the links down in the description below if you want to see everything that I did use in this build, as well as maybe like a recommended case and a power supply. I'll throw that down there if you want a more affordable option as opposed to the Define R5 and the 750 watt Edison PSU that I had from them laying around. So yeah, I wouldn't really go with those if you're on a budget build. But it's not to say that they're bad. It's a great power supply, and I love the Define R5 case, but it's just a little bit more than I would probably spend on those components in this build, personally. Please let me know what you think about the build down in the comments below, and be sure to stay subscribed, because we're going to be doing that video very soon where I'm going to be testing that 370 versus the GTX 950, and I think that's going to be such a good matchup. I know I've already said that, but I think it's going to be really good. And please let me know who you think's going to win that. I want to see what your guys' predictions are on this one. I think it'll create some good discussion too in the comments. But I will catch you guys next time. Ta-ra, over the top. We came over the top on. Did you see that? I was like, oh. I was like, oh my god, my hand is down here. I can't get it like in here because of my mic. Well, I could, but I just went boss on that one. I was just like, what's good, yo? Okay, I'm gonna go now, actually. Oh, he did it again! Fucking badass, like.